Yeah, it's funny how we're going to just start having machines fighting each other. I imagine Skynet will take over at some point and we won't have to worry about this.
And honestly, and this is not an endorsement, we're not sponsored by them, but it is probably the best $20 I spend every single month.
You don't need to be an expert in backend. You don't need to be an expert in infrastructure. But if you're going to be deploying code into these places, you need to know what's happening.
The most important thing about that story is, did you get the check?
Who says tech can't be human?
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back again. We had to do something special because our friends at NetSPI, not only did they sponsor this episode, but they brought us on a great guest that we can't wait to kick the conversation off. Our guest this episode is Jake Reynolds. Jake is the head of emerging technology at NetSPI and also a technology enthusiast from day one, just like myself and Chris. Jake, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Ron. Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we got to talk about off the rip is you have a very interesting, I wouldn't say super unique, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there with the same story, but I would love to hear how you first got exposed to the world of hacking and technology and what got you interested in pursuing it.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was in my office at work right now, you'd actually see the picture of Hackers the movie behind me, which I feel like every single hacker has that story. In seventh grade, I saw it for the first time, and the real world's a little bit different, but at the time it was a very romantic idea that I always wanted to do. I never really figured out how to enter that space until I got into college. You know, I was an intern doing web development, and we had some internal pen testers hack our product. And that's when it clicked. I was like, oh, Angelina Jolie's actually out there hacking stuff day in and day out. It was so cool. And, you know, I had the opportunity to join that team, do some bug bounties, you know, do a lot of research. I came from the position of being an engineer, so it's very easy to learn how to break things when you know how to build them. And then shortly after that, I had the opportunity to join NetSPI, where I've gone through a couple of positions of pen tester for a couple of years, product manager, and now much more of an engineering focus role, building tools for the hackers. It's been a really fun way to expose myself to the industry.
That's awesome. I mean, when you look at your LinkedIn, it says, you know, full stack engineer. And I think that's, you know, one of the coveted titles. I think the only thing above that is 10X engineer, but I don't think anyone ever calls themselves that. So why don't you explain exactly what a full stack engineer is and why is that so important in technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to preface this with every kind of engineer is, you know, important. I focus specifically on the full stack area, but, you know, focusing on the front end, the back end is also a perfectly valid career path. But to me, in the way that I see engineering, I really like to be self-sufficient, right? If I could have $100 million in revenue for a SaaS company that I was the only engineer at, right? That's the goal. So trying to master that stack of the front end, back end, infrastructure, QA, unit testing, everything so that I know every component of what's happening in an application is extremely important to me. And it's something that is extremely important for me and engineers that I interview of. You don't need to be an expert in back end. You don't need to be an expert in infrastructure. But if you're going to be deploying code into these places, you need to know what's happening. You need to be able to put in that mindset of, okay, I just spoke with the product manager. They want this feature. If you only know the front end, it's hard to understand maybe the implications of the back end, right? You don't have to be an architect. You don't have to be an expert at it. But then you can sit down on the weekends and you can build entire apps just for fun, right? You don't need to go out and find other people do things. Now, I'm a terrible designer. And I think the dream full stack engineer, you see some of these people out there, they're incredible designers on top of all this engineering talent. But being able to just have all this knowledge, you know, I think it's a master of none, right? But it's really fun to be able to poke around in all these different areas and solve a lot of different problems every day.
Master of none, but army of one. I would love to build a $100 million product by myself or with Chris, you know, because we love each other. I would love to do that. But, you know, one of the things that comes up over and over again for people that are full stack or teams that have front end and back end engineers is security. And so much has changed with security, especially that we're using the cloud so much more. When I'm developing, I'm not necessarily keeping security in mind, even though I'm a security practitioner. The attack surface is just so vast. Like, am I really going to go through every single application and setting and make sure it's best practice? I should, but sometimes I don't because of the time constraint of my day. What do you have to say about like the attack surface now that you get to see just everything, front end and back end?
Yeah. So the product I lead at NetSPI is our attack surface management platform, right? We scan the internet, find all the fun stuff that is exposed to the entire world. As much as I like to believe I write the most secure code in the world, I think it's always about planning for when something happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
If something happens,
Right.
how fast are you going to detect it? How fast are you going to be able to respond to it? Right? You both come from kind of the detection and response side. How fast is that team going to be able to identify if I have a SQL injection in my code, right? God forbid. I think there's a lot of strong coding principles you can put in place and train your engineers properly. But the attack surface is so vast, especially with a lot of the top financial institutions we work with, technology companies. You're not going to get it right 100% of the time. So having tools in the pipeline that after it's in production, you're able to check these things and find them out. And then testing yourself, right? Open a port, see if your team even discovers it. It's kind of a crazy world out there that it's depth, right? Defense in depth. You just got to keep testing yourself every single day.
When you look at the attack surface today, it's definitely expanding for a lot of organizations. Digital transformation brought a lot of people out of the organization into their homes. And so there needs to be connectivity between those two. People are bringing on SaaS applications. That widens the attack surface even more. What are you seeing as a trend for attack surface management or attack surface in general? Are we headed in a direction where we're being more safe, or do you think it's still kind of the wild, wild west? Things are growing disproportionately to we're able to secure them.
Yeah, I don't think we're hopeless. I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I did a presentation a couple of years ago just on the OWASP top 10 at a developer conference, trying to, teach engineers about security. And I mapped out how the different 10 categories have shifted over time. And since, the top 10 came out, it's almost always been the same 10 things. Same with external network security, I think, for the most part, that, it's the wild, wild west, but we're not, aside from maybe nation state threat actors, it's the same stuff, right? You have some open ports, you're running old technology, there's a backup out there you forgot about. It's really about just a lack of visibility. And I think there's a lot of really good tools emerging out there to give you visibility into these areas. But it's not too complex, right? It's easy to wrap your hands around. There's a few common places that you want to check and make sure that you have covered to, I would say, get 90 to 95% of your attack surface in tune with what your organization would want it to be.
What are those, I guess, components or areas that everyone should really be considering?
So when I demo our platform, I always pull up the ports page and I say, SANS, the human factor, and SANS DNS vulnerabilities. Almost everything comes back to a port, right? A port's open, it's serving technology, and you don't know about it, or you don't have something in place to detect that. That is one of the largest things we see. And we always hear people on calls like, oh my God, that's exposed to the internet. How did that happen? Outside of that, I think we all know the cloud. There's so many ways to shoot yourself in the foot with opening something up, exposing an AWS RDS backup to the internet, S3 buckets, etc. Trying to get your hands around that. But there's so much noise today, right? You turn on a cloud security posture management. There's great platforms out there, but they'll give you 20,000 alerts. Being able to key in on as an organization, right? What are the things we're actually concerned about? You turn on, you'll even have 500 criticals, right? Within that, what are actually exploitable? That's a much larger area than just ports. But I think it's something important to look at when you're trying to cover the primary parts of your attack surface.
Yeah, you don't hear people talk about ports much anymore because everyone's kind of wrapped up around the bigger sort of pieces of infrastructure, right? S3 buckets, people are talking about EC2 instances, but we tend to forget about ports. I mean, that's where I really got my start, was being a network analyst, like really focused on like how do you use IP addresses in this big scheme of cybersecurity? What ports are important for us to monitor and shut down or enable, at least with some additional context. Do you feel like that the folks that are coming out today have enough of that background in networking to really be efficient, or is that something that's just going to be baked into the processes that we have today with things like AWS, Azure, and the like?
I think it's best to plan that nobody will have that knowledge and, let your technology work for you, right? So that they can come in and not have to worry about all these things. I do think a big part of, us at NetSPI, we have NetSPI University, which is our training program for new college grads to get them up to speed on web application penetration testing. And more we talk about, we need to give them the fundamentals in external network penetration testing, as well as the engineers on my team is, hey, we have things that face the internet. Here are the implications of if you expose A, B, or C to what's out there in the internet. What I do think is fascinating is you can give them all this training, but as we come into this new era, maybe over the next decade of IPv6, you can't port scan IPv6. You're never going to finish, right? So we're coming in this entire new area where, IPv6 is still even a little unknown to me. Imagine what engineers that have never had to touch it, how are they going to understand to secure it? And how are we going to have, software to monitor those kinds of things? I think we'll see kind of a resurgence of that as we go into the new trends for IP addresses.
It's like we keep adding all these layers of abstraction, even with the cloud. Like when I first got started in cybersecurity, we would do asset management the old-fashioned way, scanning, looking for open ports, asking people, writing things into a spreadsheet or even on paper sometimes if you didn't have your laptop in front of you because meetings were in person. And now it's all abstracted. If you're using multiple clouds, you're really a lot of organizations and individuals are just relying on that provider to give them that picture of all of their assets. But if you have one asset that's not in the cloud, that could go unnoticed. Like, how have you seen the protection or even the attack side of abstraction change?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've talked to a single person that's interested in attack surface management that can give me a full list of all the assets, right? They say, well, we have a CMDB. IT also has their own CMDB. We don't really talk to each other that much. Nobody has a handle on this kind of stuff. And then you look at, what kind of threats can emerge from this? You have the supply chain side of your attack surface, which isn't something that you see considered a lot. You see a lot of people think about the external network, but you have a lot of those providers that can expand the issues. But I like to do bug bounties on the weekend, so you keep myself fresh, if you will. And the only thing I look for, my only method, right, it's not advanced. I'll pull up certificate transparency logs for a specific company, call it Snapchat, right? Big fan of Snapchat. And I'll just try to find something old, something they don't remember, something they forgot about, because it's not in their CMDB. It's kind of gone out of rotation. And just go look at it. 95% of the time, you're going to find something misconfigured, something hanging that they don't know about.
When you do bug bounties on the weekend, because it's really refreshing when you hear about someone that does cybersecurity during the day, and then in their off time, they do more cybersecurity stuff, but maybe the more fun aspect of cybersecurity. When you're doing bug bounties and things like that, do you ever feel like you pull from your day job and bring it into the bug bounty, and then vice versa, bring information from bug bounty and bring it into your day job? And do you have a story about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I do it to kind of enrich my knowledge. I spend a lot of time during my day right now engineering, right? So I can kind of get a little rusty on the pen testing side of things. So I'll look at, in the case of external pen testing and bug bounties, we have a significant amount of discovery techniques for finding assets on the external attack surface for our customers. It's basically just professional bug bounties, right? More or less. We're going to find everything we can out there and then apply penetration testing to it. So bug bounties, actually, certificate transparency logs was something I discovered through bug bounties. We now ingest those in my product. We use those to expand the attack surface that we monitor for our clients. So look at subject alternative names in the certificates, look at the organization of a certificate that matches our client's name, and then pivot and find all of the certificates with that organization. It's kind of a really good way to see what's out there, what's trending, because it's, you don't get outside your bubble very often inside of a company. So going out there and seeing what other hackers are doing is really fun. And I can talk publicly about this now, just a fun bug bounty story. It's been 5 years. It's, disclosed on HackerOne.
Oh, cool.
It was my first big bug bounty, and I kind of screwed it up. Spoiler alert. But it was Snapchat, right? And they did everything perfectly here. This is nothing against Snapchat. I was once again went through certificate transparency logs, and I looked for was looking for subdomain takeover. So I found blog.snapchat.com. Pointed to Tumblr, but you get a 404 on Tumblr. I'm like, I know that, right? I can go register this subdomain now on Tumblr and take over blog.snapchat.com. I did just that. It worked. My heart was pounding. I was freaking out. This is one of the coolest things. I was looking up how much they've paid out people in the past for similar things. I was like, I'm going to make thousands of dollars. And then I started thinking, oh no, they're going to send the FBI to get me because they're going to think I'm a bad hacker, right? A bad actor. So I put my name on there and said, hey, my name's Jake Reynolds. I submitted a report on HackerOne. Please reach out. What I didn't know at the time was that week they were launching spectacles, their sunglasses, and all of their marketing was pushing to blog.snapchat.com. And then people go to it and they just see, hey, I'm a kid and I screwed up your website. Sorry about that. Check your email.
Wow.
And they reached out and they were very gracious. And, they kind of told me like, hey, that's public disclosure. You probably shouldn't do that, but please, let's coordinate this. And they're very polite the entire time. But since then, I've learned a little bit more about how to gracefully handle those types of vulnerabilities. But that professionalism aspect, right? Taking that and pulling that into my day job. We deal with a lot of sensitive vulnerabilities to our clients. Obviously, in the consulting business, you want to make sure that you handle those with a bit more tact than taking over the web page and throwing your name on it. So it's a fun way, to balance my day job and my nighttime life.
The most important thing about that story is, did you get the check?
No, they didn't sue me. That's all I'm happy for. So it's unfortunate.
Oh, darn. Well, you live and you learn, and you also got some reps underneath of you, which is always great. Mm-hmm. I tried bug bounty years and years ago, and I didn't have any luck. I come from, the government space, so I was always accustomed to using tools and, using things like Metasploit. I didn't realize at the time back in like 2014 that there was this whole world of web application that was just so vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's still going to be trending that way to where we see more web application exploits? Do you think that maybe we'll see network exploits again, or maybe even mobile?
Yeah, it's something I hear from clients a lot is they say, hey, we're getting a lot of web vulnerabilities from your team. We're not getting a lot of network vulnerabilities. And that's because you expose port 80 and you have so much wealth of attack surface to go after on that website versus, port 22, unless you can brute force the credentials or it's using a vulnerable version, there's nothing there, right? So it's going to be, I think, continuing to see expansion in the web attack surface. But still, even in bug bounties, nothing I found was hard, right? It wasn't some insane genius level expertise that got me there. It's somebody was leaking a password in an API response and I'm the first person that saw it, right? So it's a lot of those simple things. You'll always have some crazy 0 days that people much smarter than myself will drop and do it on bug bounties. But it's always those simple things that really sneak up and get you. On websites, there's just so much possibility for that because so much of it is homegrown technology versus nobody's rolling their own SSH server or their own FTP server, more or less, right? People that do, they end up getting in trouble. But.
I need to jump in here for a second because our sponsor and friends at NetSPI wanted us to ask you, our listeners, a question. Are you constantly wondering what else is on your attack surface? NetSPI has created an attack surface management platform to help you make sense of it all. NetSPI has a team of skilled pen testers that can help you find those critical vulnerabilities and become your partner in creating the right remediation game plan for you. To learn more about NetSPI, visit netspy.com/HVM and tell them Hacker Valley sent you. Thank you, NetSPI, for sponsoring this episode. Now let's get back to the conversation.
Someone who's like really looking at emerging technologies, I'm sure you're all in on things like AI. You're all in on ChatGPT, I'm sure. I've been messing around with ChatGPT since I heard about it. And honestly, and this is not an endorsement, we're not sponsored by them, but it is probably the best $20 I spend every single month. Do you use emerging technologies and try to get ideas for how to bring that into the business? And what is your exposure to some of the newer technologies that are out today?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like every week somebody asks me about blockchain whenever they hear that I'm into emerging technology. And, I say that's a different conversation. That's not the type of emerging technology I'm focused on here. Yeah, it's not even necessarily the most emergent of technologies, but just new technology. What are people building? What are they open sourcing? So every day I go through my 3 favorite websites, right? Reddit r/programming, the GitHub Explore page to see the top trending repositories for that day, and Hacker News, right? What's coming out? What's hot now? The Explore page on GitHub has been ChatGPT nonstop for 6 weeks, and it upsets me because I want to see something else for once. But seeing out there and seeing, what tools are people open sourcing? Are they open sourcing nice new authentication frameworks or ways that we can reduce the amount of code we write and use more battle tested, more robust and more easily secured code, right? Because the less code I manage, the less chance there is for vulnerabilities to be introduced to it. So trying to find ways to use the intelligence of others. And then you look at, what are the crazy CVEs that are coming out, right? I see that as an emerging technology, just new ways to abuse software that is available in the world. But it's a nice thing. We do play around a lot with ChatGPT. We have a cybersecurity research engineer on my team, and his focus is to work with our hacking team and automate their jobs. And one of the things we like to do on websites is try and identify if a server supports vhosts. So if multiple domain names resolve to a single IP address, let's send each combination of domain and IP to that host and see if we get different responses. The problem is we run a lot of our scanning in Lambda functions. Lambda functions have a read-only file system. So we can't modify Etsy hosts. And a lot of this, we're using third-party scanners that we can't control the DNS resolvers of. It's been a problem we've been researching for a long time. He gave it to ChatGPT. ChatGPT wrote him a program in C that'll bind to libc and intercept all requests to DNS resolvers and instead substitute them to temp/hosts, which is a writable file system. This is something that, I've been struggling with forever. And stupid old ChatGPT beat me to it. It kind of takes a ding to your ego. But it's so fascinating that I'm not a great C developer, but I can now use these tools that plug into the kernel or plug into libc in ways that would take me hours, if not days, to get done.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fun seeing not only how we can use emerging tech within NetSPI to make our lives easier and our programs better, but then deliver that result to the end user is kind of a fascinating place to be. And that's what excites me most, is finding a new library, finding somebody that beat me to an idea and wrote it 10 times better than I ever could have. It's really fun.
Back in 2016, DARPA put on a AI CTF at Black Hat, and it was so cool. Everybody was talking about it that year. People couldn't get enough of it. But all of a sudden, ChatGPT comes out, and now everybody says, stop talking about ChatGPT. I'm so over it. Do you think that we're at the top of the hype, though? Like, it seems like the tech is just so young and ripe that it's going to be here to stay. And I don't know if we've even scratched the surface on the use cases quite yet.
Yeah, it's difficult. I told myself, I think all three of us have probably lost some amount of money on Bitcoin. Maybe it's just me. I'm terrible at those things, but I always told myself, next time Bitcoin is boring, or Solana. Next time Bitcoin's boring again, I'm going to buy a bunch, and not just boring, but nobody's talking about it, right? It's dead. Because that's when you want to get into these kind of things. That's how I think ChatGPT. I think there's still some way for it to go upwards on this hype cycle. Then it's going to come down, right? The marketing hype will kind of fall down. The public will get used to it. And that's when the real innovation is going to begin, right? When it's not some kind of, you get a crazy valuation just because you have AI, but what actual value are you extracting from these systems? How are you innovating? And then hopefully in the second hype cycle, you're on board that train and you have some really, really unique solutions for it. But I'm excited to see, outside of the cool gimmicks that we've all seen, how it's really going to change our day-to-day lives over the next 5 to 10 years, not just adding some cool widgets here in the next couple months.
Yeah, I'm not only expecting kind of that down cycle for ChatGPT and other AI stuff, I'm counting on it, because I started using like Midjourney back in the day when it first came out, and it was decent. It was pretty good. And then you didn't hear anything about it. And then one day I was like, let me hop in here, see what version they're at, see what improvements they've made. Like, it's infinitely better than what it was when it first came out. I mean, you could spin up a high quality HD image of just about anything you could dream up. And I'm like, I'm going to use this. And I don't care if anyone else is just kind of like, that's yesteryear's news. And I'm sure the same thing is going to happen with ChatGPT. GPT-4 just came out, and it's an iterative improvement against GPT-3. I think that's going to happen a lot with a lot of technology. There's going to be that hype cycle. Everyone's going to be like, this is the best thing ever. People are going to get sick of it. And then it's only going to live in the minds and the day-to-day of the people that are true technologists and say, hey, I'm going to use this to improve myself. I'm going to use this to 10x the output of my work. So, I mean, people are sleeping on it, but I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, I think, for us, one of the problems I have is I find all these fun technologies and they're all SaaS platforms. We're a cybersecurity company. Our clients don't like us sending their data to other people. So if I can't self-host it, it's going to be very hard to use it. And now you have platforms like Hugging Face, right? Or places that you can start pulling models from. I think once we get some really solid self-hostable platforms to use these models and play with them and put them into our technology and train them on proprietary or sensitive data, I think, us personally, NetSPI as a company, we'll see a greater adoption of it. And then, I'd love to use GitHub Copilot, but we don't want to, even though our source code is, hosted in GitHub, I don't want them training and using our data for those kinds of things. So self-hosted model, I think will help the adoption in either highly secure environments or, the Fortune 500 that, have those kinds of security controls in place.
Oh man, now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it. I can't imagine a life without Copilot. Copilot is literally my Copilot. It helped me build the Hacker Valley website. And we were having a conversation before we recorded, and you were telling us that if there was a piece of tech that was out there that you needed, it would be something that would help increase your bandwidth to code, increase your bandwidth to create ideas, increase your bandwidth to communicate. And I loved it. What would you say is that piece of machine built or AI, ML piece of technology that cybersecurity needs?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think, earlier we were talking about CSPMs and that you'll get 500 criticals, 1,000 criticals. Today, everybody has a risk score or an AI score or something to help you, prioritize your data more or less. But they're still, I think, very surface level type of things. They don't actually have the intuition to put into context these vulnerabilities and let you know, oh no, this is, this will be a breach tomorrow if you don't fix it. This one's just the best practice, right? It's a vulnerable version of PHP, but you're not using the vulnerable component. I think adding in something like that can actually see the exploitability of vulnerabilities in your software will be huge. We use GitHub Dependabot, and 95% of the time it's, you'll have regular expression denial of service in a third-party JavaScript library. It's like, that's great, but I don't even use that library. It's a transient dependency, and we don't use any of that functionality. Having something that can take that more into context. See it with things like, I believe there's a company called Semly that got acquired by GitHub to have CodeQL, right? Almost like SQL for your code base, so you can put together intelligent queries to see how data moves through the application, right? And if this data is not validated by the point it gets to the database, it's SQL injection, for example. Being able to apply that type of intelligence, I think will significantly increase code security, right? As we talk about the web application attack surface. The network attack surface, I'm not sure. I think anomaly detection is a really fascinating area for machine learning. You have so much noise in the data, as I'm sure both of you know. Being able to pluck out what's important. We use anomaly detection just in our error rates, right? You have errors kind of on occasion, especially when you're interacting with the global internet. But when is that too many errors, or when are those errors significant, or when are they flagging for something else? Just to ramble on here, we use AWS Guard Duty, for example, in our systems. It has a lot of really intelligent mechanisms for identifying malicious activity within our network. So even if I connect with my production AWS credentials and pull something from S3, it yells at me because I don't do that on a routine basis. It's not a machine user, right? And they use the intelligence to alert us on that. I think there's a lot of cool ways that aren't as flashy, but they help you actually understand the true impact of issues on your attack surface.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. When we talk about new technology, we get really, really excited as practitioners and technologists. But on the other side of that coin, you still have attackers that are leveraging that same technology to do something that's counterproductive to our work. They're trying to be as innovative, if not more innovative than we are. And it's that constant battle of the mind, constant battle of wits that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. What is your opinion? How are we going to continue to keep the odds in our favor and stack the deck against the attacker?
Yeah, it's funny how we're going to just start having machines fighting each other. And it's, I imagine Skynet will take over at some point and we won't have to worry about this.
Yeah. Right.
But I think, you have to adopt the same technologies and then some that the attackers are using, which requires a significant amount of investment. One of my favorite things that I see right now is you have prompt engineering, right? Properly constructing inputs to give to ChatGPT so that you get the response you want. And you have hackers that are learning how to escape these prompts. So one I saw this week,
right.
I think on Hacker News, was somebody put in their LinkedIn biography a prompt escape so that if somebody, recruiter, tried to automatically generate a cold email to them for recruiting, it would escape and then say, hey, I used ChatGPT to automatically send you this message, right? Those kind of things are fascinating. But you have to stay in tune with what the attackers are doing. And you have to adopt the same technology, right? They're probably smarter than you. So you have to have something that helps you get ahead. And I think the largest issue in the way of that is budget, right? The being able to prioritize these types of things in your organizations. Like we saw, a decade ago, nothing really happened until those large scale data breaches started happening. And I think it'll take a little while for people to understand the seriousness of the way that these intelligent systems can abuse things inside of your network. And then we'll see that shift really on kind of the defensive side of technology to hopefully, stop these adversaries.
I love your mindset because it's very practical. It's like, hey, have this technology approach, this technology focus, but don't get too caught up in it. Still use yourself. There's nothing like human ingenuity. For anyone that is getting lost in the sauce of AI, they're kind of blurring the lines between where their skills are at and where their technology is assisting them. How would you say to have that nice, fine balance for anyone out there listening?
Yeah, it's all about problem solving, right? Today, I solve problems by writing code. A year from now, I'll solve problems by understanding how to interact with these AIs. And I think a lot of developers, once again, I saw a thread on this last week where, we solve the same problems over and over and over again as engineers. And now we can use artificial intelligence to solve those problems and use human creativity where it's important. So I think it's just another tool in your tool belt, right? I preach a lot that your technology should work for you. You should not work for your technology. So if you have to set something up and you have to give it all this love, care, and feeding to work, it's not the right tool. And for some people, AI might not be the right tool to help them do that. But I think finding out, putting your ego aside, how it can replace the parts of you that are not providing value to your company or to your software, and spending your time focusing on what's important. Which in hacking, luckily, I don't think machines will evolve soon enough in the near future to be able to replace that true human element of connecting these disparate data sets, and understanding the importance of prioritizing certain areas in the attack path or certain vulnerabilities or exposures. But yeah, it's going to be a hard balance to find. I think it scares myself personally, but a lot of people on, am I going to be replaced by this? And it's no, but you're going to change, right? The type of work you will do is going to be significantly different in a couple of years.
100%. Jake, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to hop on the mics with us. If anyone's interested in learning more about Jake or even NetSPI and all the great things they're doing over there, be sure to jump into the show notes wherever you're listening to this and check them out. And with that, we will see everyone next time.